Hey guys, this is V16 for the how to design and build a 59 Korina Les Paul replica using Stuart McDonald templates. And we got a lot of ground to cover, but most of it's just theory. And in about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to start epoxy, mixing up the epoxy, and I'm going to glue this neck in real time so you can see exactly how simple it is as long as you've done a really good job with all your fitment. And we'll talk about that stuff in a little while. But I want to get this off the table. So the only way I can get it off the table is to clarify what in the world it was that I was talking about in the last video. Because I kind of rushed the templates a little bit. But it is what it is. So let's dive right in and talk about this. When I glue up two pieces that are intended to be a top that is going to get carved, or maybe it's just going to be a flat top, and maybe this is only 1/4 of an inch thick, and it's going to get binding or something. So the sky's the limit. But a lot of times, what I will do in order to start defining center lines, what I do is when this upper board everything is square, I run it down the table saw just enough to relieve material off that top side, because my theory is the only thing I want to be glued together or that I have to be sighting or be under clamping pressure is what's going to be left after the guitar is built and finished. So to me, there's no sense in doing a really precision machine work up in all of these areas up here if it's all going to get cut out. Meaning, by relieving this material right here on this top piece, it allows me to just concentrating on gluing up the center line right here. And then it's not that you're being lazy. And then obviously what's critically important is the center line back here, but not nearly as important right here as it is back here. Because the reason I'm discussing this, if you've never done this before, it's very unlikely that you understand and know how to do really good glue ups. And I'm just trying to help you cheat a little bit so you can end up with a guitar that once all this stuff gets installed, and only what it is that you see is what's critically important. And I know some guys are not going to read between the lines, and they're going to think I'm talking about doing shoddy work. I'm not. I'm talking about just making certain that it's only beautiful where it has to be. Now, that does not apply to the backs. If you're gluing up a two-piece back, you got to know what you're doing, because everything about that is visual. But then once you come out from under all this, tailpiece and the bridge and this pickup and all this jazz and that pickup there, and then maybe you got a pick guard here, what you're really seeing, and I'll show that little guitar in a minute, but what you're really seeing is the beauty of the glue up right here up to the bridge, or to the tailpiece. And I'm not going to start talking about anything hypothetical. So and then once you're clamping that up, then you're in good shape, and you're focusing on learning how to glue up the top. But if you screw up your first one, and let's say you had a bit of a gap up here, well, let me back up. You're not going to have a gap because you did a controlled cut. But if you had a little bit of a gap right in here, well, it doesn't matter, because it's going to get routed out anyway and covered up. Okay, and I shouldn't even be talking about this stuff, because I know a lot of guys might read between the lines and think that I'm talking about doing shoddy work. I'm talking about the beginner builder that's learning how to glue up material. Okay, now the next thing I do is, after I get this really precision laid out, and I like to go ahead and even the tops, before I glue the tops down, I like to do precision route work. So I say that to say this top is exactly the finished footprint of the guitar, and that's okay for me, because I know that it's going to get carved down, it's going to get binding and all that jazz. So most of what you see everything that you see is going to get covered up eventually. Okay, and I'm not going to start talking about binding. So what you really want to focus on here is getting ready to glue this down. And let me explain what I'm talking about here. When I learned to do top building, I was building acoustic jazz guitars. I never had the liberty of building any slab guitars with the tops on them and then do the carving on the top. I came right out of the gate building archtop jazz guitars that were like the 16 and 17-inch bodies, and then I would carve the tops, and then you have to come in and carve out the backs. It's just like a violin or a cello or a large upright bass. So I got accustomed to just building what they call plates, and then you tune the plates by as you carve them. And I got comfortable enough doing that I got to think. I thought, well, man, to me it's just as easy to build my archtop plate, and I could even put this in the jig that I used to use to carve jazz guitars, and even do all my carving here if I wanted to, and then glue that down. I don't do that because it's nice to have this really flat surface atop that lower, so that then you can come up here with your uh, templates and everything is true and square, and any routing you do is perfectly true and square. Hence the discussion I had about routing out that mortise. So I kind of casually made the statement that, hey, it's not all that important, and then it prompted me to start talking about all that pitching and rolling stuff. That was really, I shouldn't have made that statement, because it's critically important that you get your templates perfectly flat and true with the lower. And I'm not going to talk about that anymore, because anybody that's building a guitar, you've probably built furniture, and you know the importance of being true and square and all flat and all that jazz. We call it S4S. Okay, but this is what's important. And so you're going to build a guitar, and you might know beyond a shadow of a doubt, absolutely, man, I am building a humbucker. You know what? And this is the scale. These are the correct locations, and that's the guitar I want. If you wanted to, with this top, you could actually go ahead and route these out. If you were 100% confident that's what you were going to do. But because I build guitars to sell, the only area I want to route out is the area that would be routed out whether you go with a humbucker or the P90. Okay? Never heard anybody talk about this. It doesn't mean that I'm the first one that ever came up with this idea, because I know I'm not. But by having these two templates here, and there is a center line. There's a center line on the lower template, and there's a center line on that template right there. You basically line them up, and then you come in with your pencil, and you obviously trace out. Let me explain what I'm talking about. You don't stack them up and draw the pencil mark and cut it out. You draw the area with the humbucker template first, then you remove that humbucker template and you lay the P90 template down, and then you draw out that area, and then you assess what area needs to be roughed out, regardless of which route you go. And it would be this area right here. It would be that line right there, all the way over to that edge. They're identical in their width. But the P90 may go all the way back here, but if you cut that out, then you wouldn't be able to do a humbucker. So you have to do this funky little half humbucker cut right here, and then you do the opposite on the top end. But that should make perfect sense. You're just looking at the area that you can relieve, and then you're going to end up with it looking like this right here. And the reason I'm talking about this again is because I had a guy send a question. He was like, where does the pickup wiring go? And that's awesome. I love questions like that, because it lets me know that there's people out there that are truly curious and they're wanting to learn this. This is just one of the steps in the build, and I haven't gotten to that point to where I have finished the routing depth. And once I elect to go with humbuckers, then I put the humbucker template up here, fasten it in line, and then I start doing all the route work. And then as I cut down, you'll see that mahogany right there. that is something that I do custom. I put a fillet atop that, but once I route out for the humbuckers, it will reveal a cut right there. It will once you go down deep enough, it'll open up to the uh, three-way wiring harness channel, which you can also feed the pickups in. And a lot of us builders, we make the assumption that everybody understands that, but you have to machine that diagonal cut before the top gets glued down. If you did not, you would have to come in here with a real long half-inch drill bit. We're talking 16, 18 inches long, and you'd have to drill from down here all the way up through there, and that would be a lot of extra work that's unnecessary. Okay, so stop. Let me check the time because I may talk about it a little bit more. Yeah, we're only 11 minutes. Let me get a drink of water. So I hope that makes sense. Oh, well, I didn't clarify why I do that. Why do I do that? Because I like to epoxy my tops down. And let's say that I'm building a chambered guitar. Let's say we're going to build a left-hand guitar. And either it's chambered or it's not chambered. It's just all solid. Well, that's pretty much what a left-hand guitar would look like. And this control cavity would be cut all the way through. But then you're doing all your glue and your epoxy up here. I don't like the idea of using a water-based glue and then putting water-based glue here and then sealing those two pieces together and clamping them, because to me, I know it'll work and I know it will dry, but I don't like the idea of the water-based glue being deprived of any air too soon. But then again, if you wait too long, then the glue that you put in there will turn into a rubber gasket. So I like using the epoxy extremely thin, and when I put this top down, there's just minimal amount of fitment. But since I machined those little pre-cuts in there, it allows somewhere for the epoxy to squeeze out in that upper location. And I know that's a real long way about talking about that, but it's pretty important because I didn't get to talk about that in any detail at the end of the video because it was a long video and I was kind of losing my focus. And I probably just said, hey, we'll talk about the videos, the templates in the next video. So there you have it. All right, so let me pause and we'll mix up some epoxy and we'll glue this neck in, and hopefully this will all take place for you guys in like 15 to 20 minutes. But maybe 30 minutes. But for me, it'll take about 45 minutes to an hour because I'll be pausing and stuff like that. So let me pause and get the table cleaned off, organized, and then we'll go from there. Okay, let's dive back in. The first thing you're going to want to do, especially if you've never done this before, is you need to do the whole job. I mean, the complete job, the complete installation, but with no glue in it. You want to go through all the different operations and see what you should or should not do, and or when you should do those particular operations. And you need to get your table cleaned off. Obviously, that's a given. But probably one of the most important things is to come in here with some acetone and open up the grain and stuff like that. And then, because I'm going to be epoxying this, but if you were doing it with a tight bond, then you would want to wet that wood, just not wet, moisten it so it would open up the grain, and then take a wire brush and brush the grain to really open it up, and that would allow you to get a better glue. But the mortise and the tenon, you want to get that cleaned with your acetone because we're getting ready to do epoxy. So the operations, obviously that's what you're wanting to achieve right there, right? So you got to figure out, okay, well, I'm going to have a clamp and I'm going to have a strap, where my strap is going to have to run down the center of the body. So that ain't going to work. That's going to be in the way. That piece of foam is in the way. So I'm going to have to change gears and go with something that is consistent, and just to keep your stress under control. and on that note, if you're working with epoxy, you got about well, no, I shouldn't have said that. You got about 45 minutes work time. So if you're working with epoxy, you're not going to be getting stressed out at all. But you're going to want to be able to raise that up a little bit so that you'll be able to get your strap through there, and then also reach under here with your C-clamp. Do that right. Okay. And then you'll be able to come down with your C-clamp. But I'm not about to put any pressure on that just yet because I'll put a dent in the back of the guitar. So I'm going to need the I'm going to need the C-clamp, not because I want crushing pressure, but because I can work with it like a micrometer. I can work real gentle with it, or I can reach up here and back off. It's a phenomenal tool. So you do not want to be using quick grips on this because sometimes they have a tendency to pull. I say sometimes, they almost always have a tendency to pull. So now that you're accumulating the real simple tools in order to do your job, we know that we're going to want to have some sort of little medallion that we can put crushing pressure on there if we need to, or I'm going to say moderate pressure. But then we're going to tape it, and I just know to tape it in this location right here. That always works really well, because it's perfectly centered. Okay, so now I don't have to worry about that falling out of the way. And that little piece of medallion had a piece of like faux leather on there, because when you're building your guitar cases, you'll have this like little faux leather material. That's excellent to use. And oh, look, I almost messed up, so I need to get that off the table. So I'll be working this operation right here, and I just know from doing this, I use just your traditional trailer strap that you can get from your big box, and you want, obviously it's going to be a ratchet strap. So what you're going to want to do is determine where do I want everything to be once there's epoxy there. I don't want this obviously right there because I won't be able to monitor anything. I want that ratchet way down there so that I can, I'm sorry, I got this backwards. Apologies. This will, okay, here's the strap. It'll go like this. Down there, that'll sit there. Otherwise, this is going to cut into your top real bad and really, really make a mess. But then this strap will come down the neck. Look, I hope that's in the camera. That should be good. And then the strap will come down the neck. I'm not about to let that fall off the table. And it'll just go straight into your ratchet. Okay. And then, and if you need to monitor anything, well, then you can just lift that up or move it over a little bit. But quite frankly, you shouldn't have to monitor anything because the strap will be perfectly in center. Okay. So I guess I'll just, let me check the time. Yeah, we're already at 18 minutes, and I just wanted to spend enough time with that general conversation so that if I pause the camera and just do part of the job and then I kick the camera back on, I won't be having to explain what it was I was thinking or not thinking, because sometimes this can get a little bit stressful, but hopefully it won't. Okay, so that's what we want to achieve. And now that we've got our medallion under there, just do the job. Okay, now I'm holding just enough pressure that I can move it around a little bit if I want to. And actually, I'm going to take advantage of that. I had mentioned, using this, to pull through and to fit everything. I had mentioned using a 120. Don't use a 120. That's way too aggressive. That is a 220. Okay, so I can get that off the table because I'm now redeemed. But 120 would have been way too aggressive for fitting that. Okay. Oh, I know what it was. I'm glad I'm doing this, because now once this strap comes down through here, this strap will be able to roll around the side of the clamp. You do not want to put this down and then put the clamp atop that. you could cause some tension issues because you want the tension in this strap to be very consistent. And this strap is not going to be very aggressively tight at all. If you were to get too tight, you'll break the neck, you'll break the headstock. Okay. So now let me pause and mix up the epoxy, and then I'll may clean the table off a little bit more so that once I'm actually doing the job, it'll be just a pristine table, and it should be fairly easy to understand what I'm doing, especially since we've talked about this cowboy rig here. Let me cover something briefly that's really important. Uh, you don't want to just hook that right there. So what you can do is just fold this one back like that and make certain that it folds down that way. Then hook that such as that. Okay. Now just imagine this is on the back of the guitar. So this is up under it. And then that way, once you start pulling tension, you don't have this cluster, you know what, of knot there that could screw up the back of the guitar. It'd be a real clean pull. And also, it would probably be wise to put something even back there to protect that. Yeah, I'll do that just to be safe because that could get me in trouble. But I hope that makes sense. That'll be because once I start doing this, you're no longer going to see what's going on in the back of the guitar. The only thing you're going to see is this ratchet clamp up here on the top, and you won't have a clue how I had connected the two. So let me pause, and now we'll come back and finish the guitar. Okay, probably we'll have to pause a couple more times through the process, but nonetheless, it should be fairly easy to finish from here on out. This is 1 to 1 ratio. It's a 24-hour cure time. I wouldn't recommend using any quick dry at all. You need the time to keep things under control. And when I mix epoxy, I recommend mixing it obviously 1 to 1 and mixing, and drop a little bit of acetone in it just to keep it smooth and creamy, but not much, just a drop or two. And then after you've mixed it for a couple of minutes, then let it sit for about 5 minutes. And then in that process of sitting there for 5 minutes, it will start kicking on a molecular level. And I learned this from a professional boat restoration guy down in South Florida about the critical importance of really taking your time with your epoxy. And if you're using a quick dry, well then you're rushing the operation. But what we're about to do here, even if you put this together and there was some sort of weird hiccup that you overlooked and you realize, oh wow, you got to pull the neck apart. Well, with the epoxy, you can pull the neck out, correct whatever cricket is in there, and something might have fallen down in there, and then you can correct that, and then repeat the process. In other words, you could put all the epoxy on it and then remove the whole thing and correct the problem, and then put it back together and glue it, and all while you're making a pot of coffee. It's such a stress-free operation, and I'll do the best I can to keep this on the camera, but it's kind of a given that all I'm doing is just dragging the epoxy around and just sealing the grain. And I think I covered in the beginning of this video that you need to open up that grain back there with, your acetone wash, especially if you're doing epoxy. And you should have fit the job well enough that you're only really just sealing both the surface here and then the surface there. And odds are I'm probably going to have to mix up a little bit more epoxy, but there's no sense in rushing it. Wasting it. So we'll cross that bridge if we need to. And the great thing about this epoxy that I'm putting in right here, it could sit here for probably 45 minutes would be really too long. It should be put together within about 30 minutes or so, max 35 minutes. But based on what it is that we're gluing, you probably could get away with 45 minutes and be fine. Um, but if it would got sticky on you, I wouldn't recommend and coming back and trying to thin it up with the acetone later on. You could do that, but that's a little bit cowboy. So plan your work, work your plan, and do your job. We're all laid out, got everything taped off, so shouldn't be anything that I'm having to do right there before it goes in. You know, that might cause me to get a little bit stressed out. Keeping your stress under control is the most important thing. And keeping yourself clean, keep a little bit of, you know, a 90% alcohol is really good about cleaning your fingers, but I wouldn't recommend doing that here. Let's look at it a little bit and see what it looks like. Just kind of sealing the edges a little bit. I'm not trying to build up any weight at all, any mill thickness. And you don't have to worry about putting, you can just seal the end if you want, but don't worry about loading that up, because the whole idea of the end, that's the like the overflow, that access for the squeeze out is what I was trying to think of. It's funny, sometimes I'm thinking one thing, and then something else will present itself, and I'll start thinking about that as I'm trying to explain what I was just talking about, and I get lost in my own conversation. So I apologize, but it's not easy for me to do videos and work and try to not make a mistake. But that's all you're doing, just getting getting all the wood sealed, and we could sit here for 45 minutes and just take our time and not get in a hurry. And I'm going to do something a little bit unorthodox here. I'm going to epoxy the tenon in, but I'm actually going to use tight bond out here. And I did it on that Les Paul replica over there. So that's kind of the reason I have the tape up there, but not, you know. The main reason I have the tape up there is so that when I start doing the job, if I had an excessive amount of squeeze out, I'm not panicking about trying to come up in here with some sort of scraper and scrape off epoxy that might be penetrating or would be penetrating down into the end grain of the material. It's not that big of a deal, because this guitar is just going to remain blonde. It's not going to get any stain at all. But if you're building a guitar where you know that you're going to be doing some tint work, try to keep your job as clean as possible and keep any epoxy from getting into the end grains and stuff. Okay, looks good. Now, I can talk about why this neck is such a bizarre build. Because I know that there's somebody that has just chimed into this video that has not watched any of the previous videos, and I just want to make certain that everyone understands that I do not build guitars this way. I've never built a guitar this way. This guitar that I'm building is a bit of an experiment, and it's my own personal guitar, and it's also based on the fact that I literally didn't even think I had enough wood to build the body, let alone I was shocked when I realized, oh wow, if I play my cards right, I get to teach myself how to do scarf joints. And I did just that. This is a scarf joint headstock, and um, you see everything. It's an off scarf joint up there, and then built up like a jazz guitar. Then it'll get a black stinger. I'm not going to start talking about that stuff. But the neck is solid one piece. I would not have built this neck if I had to do a join somewhere out here in the neck. That's really poor, um, you know, would work for something like this. Um, oh, I made a mistake. I need to get that epoxy because I'm going to be doing the tight bind up here. I'm talking too much. But what this boils down to is I would not build a neck like this for a client, only because it would kind of freak them out. But this is just kind of an experimental build where just glued up a bunch of wood, or all that's epoxied together. I would not have tried to tight bond glue that. You'd spend half a day building a jig to make certain that you had it under proper clamping pressure in order to get a really good build, whereas the epoxy is very forgiving. And I had mentioned in the past that I think the epoxy should be recommended for the beginner builder because, as I make the statement, you can always hear it in my voice. I'm not under any stress at all. I can just sit there for 30 minutes, and then after this is epoxied, it can sit here for 30 minutes. Well, 20, because it'll take me about 10 minutes to do this job. I'm gonna try to keep that epoxy off of the heel. And probably what I should have done was taken I might change gears here and do something a little bit different. I think I'm going to do this. I'm only going to put the tight bond on that joint right there for the reason of because it's two end-to-end grains coming together. I don't trust the epoxy, but since this is up on the body and it's basically a 90-degree corner there, I'll epoxy that. I don't have a problem with epoxy being there. And this may not make any sense right now, but I'm getting too much. That's way too much. But after this guitar gets built, I think you'll see the end grain will be really beautiful. I'm gonna stop about right there. I hope that's in the camera. If it's not, and I'm real bad about getting my cap bill in the camera. Man, I apologize for that, but I hope my cap was not in the way. Let me stop talking so much and just think about the job I'm doing. And I should have had it this way so you guys can see what I'm doing. I got way too much right there. One thing about this build, I'm not going to be sliding it in and out too much. It's just not necessary the way you would slide a tight bind in order to, uh, you know, get some good squeeze out. Okay, but I do have to have enough epoxy in here to do the job. But it's a real tight fit. It's a real flat, tight fit on this side, but it's a little bit, there's going to be a little bit of fill-in epoxy right in this area. It's a real tight fit back here. I'm talking about the tenon to the mortise, but there's a little bit of a gap right in here. And all the more reason why I love the epoxy. If this were tight bond, that would turn into a rubber gasket. But since this is epoxy, I don't have to worry about going shim crazy. And there's no sense in doing a lot down here because there's a gap right there anyway. But I do want to seal that bottom. Now the top part of that tenon is going to get machined off because that's going to become the cavity pickup, the neck pickup cavity. And let's see, how do I want to do that? I'm going to just put that there, and then I'm going to skirt some of that off because that's where it's going to get notched out down into the cavity. Okay, and it would have been wise, I should have stuck it in there and took a pencil and drew a pencil line around it, but you can see I've got plenty of epoxy to do the job. And then the next question would be, how do I want to do this? Typically what I do is just go straight down. I just take the neck I just drop it straight down in there, and I'll do just a little bit of wiggling, but for the most part, the epoxy doesn't need to be squeezed out. And if I have time, I'll talk about how the aviation industry recommends using this epoxy to build home-built aircraft. Uh, in other words, they recommend leaving a little bit of epoxy in between the two boards. It's far superior in strength. But if you squeeze all the epoxy out, the joints get weaker and they tend to break loose. And that's not something you want in an experimental home-built aircraft. And also, it might not pass inspections if you're building the plane. I was actually going to build an airplane and do it in video series about 3 years ago. And after doing all the research, I realized that's ridiculous. It's going to be so expensive to build, and then there's nowhere. There's an airport, obviously here in my hometown, but it's not free, And to own an aircraft is an extremely expensive investment. And then I've done a lot of flying when I was younger, and flying is to me is only fun when you're really close to the ground. But it gets really boring when you get to altitude because you're just kind of hovering there. So I changed my mind and decided to start building guitars on video. I had already been building guitars for a long time. Okay, so put a little bit down there in the bottom, and that way once I do push that nut down in there, it should squeeze out properly. And that's a fairly good testament of my initial mix. If that's all I got left over, I did a pretty good job. Check the time. 36 minutes of epoxy rambling. The reason I like working with the epoxy is the first, I've mentioned this before, so for the guys that have watched my series for a while, the first the first 3 to 5 really high-end jazz guitars that I ever built, it was the most miserable experience I've ever had in my whole life, because I was working with the water-based glues, and everything had to be perfect, precise, and immediate. There was no time for error, and I mean no time for error. And it was just so frustrating to realize that I thought I was a really good woodworker, but I had no idea what to expect because I had never built furniture. I had never built anything on that mastery level. I had built a lot of cabinet work, and I had done an enormous amount of general construction because I was a design build contractor for a long time, and I did a lot of architectural stuff, really high-end architectural construction. And we're talking $250,000 interiors and stuff like that, and $300,000 interiors. So it was like really high end stuff. But man, it humbled me when I started working with tight pine and building jazz guitars. So I realized that wow, the guys that build guitars are a different breed, and hence the reason I mentioned learn how to work with the epoxy, and you'll probably realize that it's a great thing to use to glue your job together. Okay, and what I am going to do here, I'm not going to do the tight bond just yet in case I panic and realize it was a screw up. And then if I do panic, then I can just load that baby full of epoxy and just say to hell with it. But what I'm trying to achieve is to not have that black glue up line that epoxy can sometimes create. It's not very good about concealing things. Okay, so check the time. 39 minutes and 27 seconds. No rush at all. Everything is. Let me see if I got that in the camera, because once I start working, I'm gonna zone out. And I kind of want to do this in just one step. But yeah, I definitely want to do this in one step because if in the camera, I wish I could get it closer to the camera, but it's just going to be the best I'll be able to do. I'll pull this up just enough to, yeah, this is working really good. And all I'm going to do is chill out here for a second, and I'm taking my right hand and I'm holding the top of the headstock. See how nice it is to have that little cutout right there. It gives me a grip point to, I could just sit here if I wanted to for 45 minutes and glue this neck together, epoxy this neck together by hand, but I don't want to do that. But see, now the sweet thing about the epoxy, you can slide out a little bit, and I'm staying nice and dry over here. It's looking really good. Okay, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna pause for a second because I've got to take this off the table so I can assess everything, and then I'll come back and discuss what I'm seeing, because I'm seeing a little bit of a gap over here, and I may have to clean some of that epoxy out, and I don't want to do this on camera and screw the guitar up. Okay, let's talk about what I'm doing here. I'm not worried about any of the joinery under there from a visual standpoint. I'm not concerned about this from a visual standpoint, nor this, because I know that I did an incredible job fitting it. But because that epoxy has such a heavy thickness to it, I got to make certain that, yeah, and unfortunately there's a little bit of epoxy got over there. So probably what's going to happen, I'm not there yet, and I may pause again. But what I'm doing is trying to, let's try something here. Let me see if I can clean this off. I'm trying to create a really pretty visual corner, and right now I think it's probably going to blow up in my face, but I don't see any squeeze out up here. So it would be cool if I could put a tight bond there. But what I was doing, I was pushing the guitar in, holding. Obviously, it'll fall apart if you don't keep your thumb on it. But I have the body in my chest, and I'm just pushing in. I'm kind of pulling it in to try to get it to bed. Well, I say try. I gotta get it to bed. If I don't get it to bed, then I did a poor job. I put too much epoxy in there, which I did not. It's perfect. Have a little bit of squeeze out, but I'm trying to create a near invisible joint. And see, that's the benefit of having that tape there. I just put my thumb in it. So hopefully this is in the camera. What I'm trying to do is just get that to bed. And it's pretty much bedded by now. Wiggle it a little bit. Motivate it. But what you would want to do is probably just sit it up here on the table and just push, I know you can't see that, but I'm just pushing down on it. And I'm just monitoring the job. Oh, I just put my thumb in there. and if that happens, just try to get it cleaned off. I'll explain what just happened if I got time. Where my thumb got in that epoxy, I stuck it up there in the neck. So I'm just going to hit it once with the acetone and leave it alone. Okay, now one thing you can do at this point, I'm going to get it back in the camera here. This is hell trying to do this on camera. I'll go ahead and get that out. And I'm just going to put it right there for right now. Try to get that out. I hope that's in the camera. What I'm doing is squeezing off some of this excess so that there's not any unnecessary excess. And now, let me get control. Let me pause and let me get organized and then get that cleaned up a little bit, and we'll go from there. Okay, I'm just going to epoxy fill that, and unfortunately, it probably will create a little bit of a line there, but it's better than trying to glue with two different. Yeah, because oh gosh, yeah, there's epoxy all in there. It would have been a nightmare. I would have been doing some major cleanup in order to try to attempt to use tight bond, and nothing wrong with it. It probably would have been okay, but we'll see. It may not create that bad of a glue line after all, but I won't know until it's too late. We'll assess it a little bit. Yeah, see, there's just enough there to do the job. There's my squeeze out. Now I'm definitely going to pause the camera, and I'm going to put this body down in the floor, and I'm going to get atop it. I'm going to put my body weight into this and make certain that I'm pushed in. But before I do that, I am going to do this right here, just so that I'm not going to put any major pressure on it. But I'm going to put just enough tension so that I don't slip up and break the thing in half and blow the neck apart. Okay, so let me pause and do that, and we'll go from there. Okay, let's get the strap on it. It's only been about maybe 5 or 10 minutes. I just spent a little time cleaning off some of the excess squeeze out, just enough to get it under control, and also assess that. And I basically just did some major push, and it's obviously because I don't have the strap on it yet. You probably will see a bit of a gap, but once I put that strap on there, there's a possibility it's going to look just as good as if it had been glued in with a type water base. And the fact that I've got that tape on there really keeps my stress down because I'm not worrying about getting contaminating the body. You have to keep in mind a lot of times when I'm building guitars, the body will be paint grade, and I'm epoxy gluing in a clear coat neck, so I'm having to protect that lacquer religiously. Otherwise, you'll be doing some major. I'm so sorry if I have my cat bill in there. You'll be doing major touch up if you let it get out of hand, and you have to be real careful how you handle this, because if you handle it wrong, in other words, if you start trying to handle it by the neck, that neck will pull right out. It'll start slipping around on you. So based on that, let's get this baby built. And actually, I will get to do this on camera now that I've just. Let's see if I can do this and not make a fool out of myself. Let me pause and do this on the floor, on the ground. Okay, I bumped the camera pretty hard there, so I think I got it back in place. But at this point, what you want to do here is lay everything out so you don't lose the flat, and then verify the direction of the ratchet. And I won't be able to show, I'm not going to move the guitar because I've got everything exactly where I want it. And I want to get some pressure on that neck. Not that it's, risking falling apart or anything, but I want to finish the job. Okay, and go into this real slow. See, I've already got just a little bit of tension. Well, actually, there's no tension there, but get that out of your way. And then just make certain that you're perfectly centered on the headstock up here and perfectly true, best you can. We're in good shape down there. Because once I make one more click, I'm probably not going to be able to adjust the center to center pull. And I've already cleaned the excess epoxy off of that. But if I had forgotten, don't worry about it. Just try to stay as clean as you can. But at this point, go ahead and stand that up a little bit. Let's do one click. Check the tension. Check the tension back here. There's no tension at all. Let's go one more click. Hardly no tension at all. But there's getting a little bit of tension here. I don't see any squeeze out. I did a real good job on my initial hand fitment. There's that, laying flat. And I don't have anything on the body yet, but I'm not going to worry about that because this is a player guitar and I'm going to be scratching the hell out of it anyway. So anything, we'll give it a little bit of character if we put a dent in there. I say that, I should. Let me see if I can find something flat. Let me just stick a board in there. Well, I'll get it later. Should be fine. But what you want to do at this point, just see there's almost no tension there at all. Maybe go one more click. Now I can hear it begin to come in to create its own little tone. That's probably thick and strong enough. And it does not take much at all. And you can tell by coming up here and just kind of, see that's too loose. So, but the worst thing you could do here is over torque it by one click. Now, that's perfect. That's just enough tension to pull her into place and make certain that she beds well and squeezes out any excess epoxy, which there's just a little, but not much. And because you've got a good, 2 hours, even if you've forgotten that epoxy down, I'd cut it and throw it away if it got epoxy to it before I risked trying to keep it nice and clean, just to protect your strap. Should be a really good build. And the cool thing about it is, wow, that's really beautiful back there. That looks good. That's bedding nicely. How are we looking up here? Almost no squeeze out. I will say this, don't get too crazy, and I'm not. I'm just getting it off of the neck. But don't come in here with too much acetone or lacquer thinner and start trying to clean that, because you'll contaminate the join and you'll screw up the actual gluing, the strength and the tonal qualities. Because right now, what I have just created, I have created a through body design guitar. It might be in component form, but tonally, this is now one piece of wood. This is one piece of wood. The top is epoxy to the lower, the neck is epoxied in, and it's really pretty joinery. Is it perfect? It's close enough for rock and roll, man. It's close enough for jazz, if you want to know the truth. Probably even classical. Take a look at that. That's what I'm talking about. You can let that lay flat. Yeah, it's not even hurting the back. So, sorry for the chaos. This is, I was going to do this video about 4 or 5 days ago. And, man, I canned it. And I tabled this thing because I was so, not stressed out, but I was just trying to figure out a good way to present this on camera and not make a fool of myself, but also be beneficial for you guys as like first time builders, that you can really get something out of this. And I think it turned out okay. I will say this, there's one video probably from about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, where I showed this exact process on camera. And I mean, that's the best video I've ever done. It was so fluid and it was like clockwork and everything was real cool. I didn't talk too much. I didn't talk about any hypotheticals. The job just was so cool and so smooth. And I can't remember where that video is, but this one is not as smooth as that one was. But because where I'm going with this, I think I did it in like 20 minutes. And even people were commenting that were like, "Oh my God, I had no idea how easy it is to build a guitar." And it's like, well, it's not that. It's just, I got lucky on that one. It worked out really well. So, all right, let me check the time. 55 minutes again. I just can't get away from those 45-minute long videos to an hour almost. But I am just going to stop talking and about this guitar, but I will discuss briefly what's about to take place. I've just ordered, and it's actually being shipped right now, some beautiful figured and or heavily figured black Korina. This is some of the most beautiful wood I've ever seen. And I'm getting ready to build a 58 Explorer replica, identical to the last 58 Explorer replica that I built. But it's going to be black Korina, neck, body, top. It'll be all clear. That's going to be a beautiful guitar. And I've already got all the parts in. I'm talking parchment, pick guard, you name it. Other than the pickups, I don't have pickups. But I've got the tuners and all the clue summon stuff. And the wood is supposed to be here Tuesday of next week. So I'm getting ready to start that video series very soon. So if you're interested in watching me build the guitar from the very beginning, I'll be covering that guitar build starting probably, what's today, Wednesday? I might actually start that video tomorrow because I couldn't believe it, but I just dropped by my local Home Depot and I found some 220 thousandths acrylic, and it is straight as an arrow. So this is basically like just under 1/4 of an inch, and I'm going to actually build my own acrylic template per Stuart McDonald's specs with the center line and all that stuff. So I'll probably do a couple of videos. Well, I'll do one video on how to build your own acrylic template if you were going to start building, 1 or 2 guitars. Because if you're just building one guitar, you really don't need the templates. But if you're going to build 1 or 2 and maybe 3 to 5, not necessarily a bad guitar, but if you were designing some sort of custom guitar, eventually you would want to move to some sort of acrylic template and something that would make your job very consistent and make it very easy. Because if your job is easier, it's more enjoyable. It's just a given. We all know that. And if you can overcome the hurdles of mistakes with a really good template, then it increases the value of the guitar as well. So I appreciate you guys dropping in, and I hope it wasn't a waste of anyone's time. But it's a real cool cowboy's way of building the guitar. It works. I do it, all of my guitars that you see, that's how I do it. And it's just 2 little tools and the epoxy. Okay? If you got any questions, let me know. I'll do what I can to help out. See you guys in the next video.